Hello, everyone. We're live. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Adam Sturman. I'm a producer here with Promethean Action. This is our 8th live question and answer show. We do this show every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. So as we get warmed up here, please, everyone, let me know where you are in the chat. Already getting shout outs from Wales. Thank you guys from Wales. Atlanta, Georgia, Illinois, Indiana, Australian. Let me know where you guys are coming in. Oh, a lot of people from Wales. Atlanta, Winnipeg, Canada. Welcome, everyone. So as you can see here, Susan's not going to be joining us today, unfortunately. As some of you know, she is actually the vice president of coalitions for the Michigan GOP. And she has a lot of official meetings that some of them she just can't get out of. So she's on business today. And Barbara, we're going to be going for maybe about an hour or an hour and 15 minutes today. Barbara just has a doctor's appointment. But we are going to be addressing, without a doubt, Trump's visit to the UK. We're going to be addressing Charlie Kirk and some other international questions that have come in, and also stuff on the Fed. But we have to see if we can get to them. And also, before we start our warming up, I just want to give a shout out to our new merch design. You can see that I'm wearing it here. I'm going to pin the products, so it'll probably show up as a little pop-up. But I just released this shirt, MAGA 2028, with Trump. As you can see here, I put his face on Mount Rushmore. This is a very, very eye-catching tee. It's actually brighter. It's actually brighter in person. So I was wearing this t-shirt a few weeks ago. I had the pre-production one, and I already had people coming up to me asking me if they could buy it. So I know this is a very eye-catching shirt. It catches glances wherever you are. It's printed on a heavyweight cotton t-shirt. It's getting to be fall, so I figured I'd print it on a fall t-shirt. Anyway, I'll put up the link here real quick. Before we get started, that's the design. If you want to get it, you can either, it should be tagged in the video, or you can go to prom.ac/shop. Okay. Massachusetts, Trump is visiting Starmer today. Okay. Denver, Sydney, hello. Thank you, Storm. Please pick one up. Okay, so in the middle of the stream later, I'll drop our 10% off code, but if you want to get one now, please, link is there. Okay, so Barbara, do you have anything you want to say before we get started here?
No, we're going to focus today on a lot of questions which, have come in, some of which, I want to warn people, and when we get into the Charlie Cook questions, be very, very careful on the internet at this point about the Charlie Cook assassination. There are all sorts of operations going on to try and distract you from A, what he actually represented, and B, the fact that the authorities are actually coming up with a good targeting of what is actually responsible at this point. But you'll see over the coming days that it extends well beyond Orem, Utah. But it's not essentially what a lot of people are putting forth on the internet. It is not Israel. It is not, anything aligned with that. It very much has to do with the recruitment of intelligence assets, violent intelligence assets, by both British intelligence and elements of the CIA. And that's what I'll be talking about a little bit later on in the broadcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. Okay, so let's just get started with our questions here. And just so that we take questions primarily from our newsletter subscribers. The link, if you want to subscribe to our newsletter, is in the description. So we're prioritizing those questions first, but I will take some questions and super chats as they come in. Okay, so here is the first question. When you speak of the Imperial Bank or just Imperial, who are they, and by what communication do they use to speak with people in our government? Is it just the banking? And what other methods business do they use in corruption and infiltration of our country's politics and administrations besides the WEC? Thank you, Jeffrey.
Basically what you're talking about is a central banking system, which has been in existence, under the former British Empire, under the Venetian Empire before it, under the Roman Empire, if you actually want to go back and look at it, which is essentially you got to control the credit and the money if you're going to run a financial system which controls people. The things that they use to communicate are basically sort of these private consensus building organizations where they all get together, the elites in, media, the elites in banking, the elites in the intelligence services, and they basically decide what's our policy going to be. And so you basically have the World Economic Forum, which I believe Jeffrey's referring to by WEC. You have the Bilderberg Group, which has existed for a very long time. You have the Trilateral Commission, which played a major, major role in our country and in Japan and Europe, when we did the big transition in 1971 into a deindustrialized economy. So they have these consensus groups. It's not like the consensus groups exercise power in and of themselves. They're simply groups where the elites get together and decide on the policy they're going to implement. And that's basically how it works. And none of us are supposed to have anything to do with that. We're not supposed to know about it. The Bilderberg Group's deliberations are secret, although they've been leaked. The World Economic Forum's deliberations are out in the open. Clearly, you can read all about them. But the key thing is selling people on various hoaxes to maintain their control. And that's why they need the media involved. So that's kind of just a sketch for you of how this whole thing works.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay. Number 2, this one's on healthcare from a longtime viewer, Brandy. Do you think the Trump administration is going to do anything to get healthcare back to where it is affordable out of big pharma and big corporate hands? Too many doctors don't know how to treat their patients other than constant testing with no resolutions and pushing drugs. Thank you, Promethean, for all you're doing. Charlie Kirk is now walking with his savior. Thank you, Brandy.
Brandy, I think this is all about what RFK Jr. is doing at HHS, which of course actually is the institute which is supposed to, both lead through grants in healthcare to people who are making breakthroughs as to how the human body works, which is essential to this thing. And I think Trump and RFK Jr. are doing everything in their power to actually excise. The thing I would point out that I don't think they've addressed sufficiently so far is how do we get Wall Street out of purchasing and taking over hospitals and medical practices. I think that's very, very dangerous. And it needs to be addressed from a regulatory standpoint. I have every faith that they're going to do that. Fundamentally, we have to look at how are we treating medicine? Is medicine a science, or has it become, as RFK Jr. actually makes a big point about, completely corrupted by money in such a way that we don't actually have really good working theories of how the human body works or what the effect of the mind is on the body, which are just fundamental scientific questions we've got to address right now. And I'm very enthusiastic because I think they are going to be addressed.
Yeah, I think so too. Some of the moves that RFK Jr. has already made to improve the public health of the nation he's done in one term what we couldn't even do in decades. Okay, so the next questions we're going to begin discussing now Trump's visit to the UK and the situation in the UK in general. So I think this next question is a little bit interesting. I'm concerned for President Trump's safety while he's in London visiting the real enemy. Any comments? Thank you, Dennis.
It's good to be concerned, but I'm not that concerned. Generally, I grew up close to Las Vegas where the mafia ran things. And the rule always was, when you're going to assassinate somebody, don't do it on your home turf. And that seems to be basically what's going on here. He is isolated from all the demonstrations and everything else that are going on. And he's been basically, are they going to kill all the people who are with him at the same time, which is a substantial portion of the major elites of the world? I don't think so. I think he's gathered a lot of big-time oligarchs around him in this visit, and in some respects, that's his best security guarantee.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, let's see. I'm going to pull up the next one here. There we go. Given what we know about the British imperial oligarchy and how they've been trying to destroy the USA for the last 250 years, is it possible that Trump will, in private conversations, of course, tell Charles, who represents the royal family, what's what? I'm certain that he will look him straight in the face, as I know that Trump is not afraid of anyone. Thank you, John, for your questions and your comments.
I think it's very possible, but I don't think it will represent exactly kind of the tenor that you're looking for here. Trump has a very deep relationship to the British Isles, not to the British oligarchy, but to the British Isles. His mother, basically was, and his entire family history is Scottish and English, and he's very proud of that. So he doesn't necessarily diss the monarchy at all times. Does he understand the British imperial oligarchy? Probably not in the same terms that I think about it, but he clearly understands it. Just witness his speech to the World Economic Forum when he walked in there and said, the future belongs to the patriots, not the globalists. So when you look at this visit, Britain is desperate at this point. The oligarchy is desperate. All of their institutions are falling apart in the wake of really what is a worldwide revolution of common sense in many respects. People have rejected the key policy which Charles has stood for, which is the Malthusian policy of zero population growth and idolatry, really, in terms of worshiping nature. All of this stuff about climate change and all this other stuff comes directly from the royal family and from the World Wildlife Fund and other institutions, which the Windsors in particular have been central to. So I think Trump is going to treat Charles, who is probably dying, with a great deal of respect and is not necessarily going to get into it with him. There's endless things on X where you can see that he's again not followed all the protocol of not touching the king and all this other nonsense. He did pat Charles on the back, which offended the people who want him to curtsy and everything else. That didn't happen. All right. And that really tells you something. But I think that this is much more a situation where the British Empire is really desperate because it's failing and they need Trump much more than he needs them. And I think that's the key thing to focus on.
Thank you, Barbara. And I'm gonna bring up, so somebody put in a super chat, but I think you already kind of answered it. How should we gauge the friendly tone Trump has struck on enemy turf? And I think you kind of mentioned that when he said he was proud of his UK history. So I think that's part, yeah.
When you basically look at this type of thing and try and analyze it, like, okay, I mean, I'll tell you the question that's on people's minds. Did Trump just sell out to the British Empire? The answer to that is emphatically not. Did Trump and J.D. Vance both express an admiration for, the British people and the relationship between Britain and the United States historically? Emphatically, yes. Do they love the oligarchy and what has happened to the British in this period in terms of suppression of free speech, all of the nonsense which has gone on with the economy, the horrible situation of London itself, the horrible situation of mass migration, which has torn apart traditional British culture? Absolutely not. So it's the policies and the ideas, not necessarily all the little links that people want to make in their mind about nouns. It's constantly a question of nouns versus verbs, as my friend Susan Kokinda likes to say. It's questions of ideas and policies versus kind of a Venn diagram, which you try and make as to how all of this works. And on the policy front, basically whatever the admiration expressed here may say, I think the policies are absolutely diametrically opposed to empire. So that's how I'd answer your question.
Thank you, Barbara. If you're just tuning in, welcome. This is our Thursday question and answer show with Promethean Action. If you're new here, we do this show every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern, and welcome. Please like and subscribe if you're not yet a subscriber to our channel. And if you want to get your questions in, we're taking them mostly from our newsletter subscribers. Please, if you're interested in asking a question for next week's show, or if you want to get all of our updates, we do 3 political briefings a week on YouTube. If you want to stay up to date and not have to worry about YouTube not notifying you, just get our newsletter. The link is in the description, and you can just go to prom.ac or just search the web for Promethean Action. We'll definitely be the first hit. You can just sign up to our newsletter there. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next question here. What is it going to take to get Starmer out of the prime minister position? And I should just comment, Trump and Starmer, I believe, just did a meeting right before we started the show. Some people said Trump was already pretty tough on Starmer. Is it King Charles who is the one to do that? And do you think Trump has discussed this with him? Thank you for all of your hard work and wonderful insight to help us understand better the real truths. Pam from Tennessee. Pam, I think this is also a function of what the English people are able, and people of the UK are able to do to get rid of Starmer.
That's exactly the point. I mean, you've got major upheaval right now in Britain. You just take last Saturday, where anywhere from 1.5 million to 3 million people turned out in a demonstration throughout London to actually call for, in essence, regime change in Britain itself. They were protesting open borders. They were protesting, above all, the killing of Charlie Kirk and what that represented. They were protesting the economic condition of most people in Britain at this point, which is pretty damn rotten. And Starmer is going to leave the position very shortly, if not by the next election, where basically Labour is polling at incredibly low rates, which is his party. Sooner than that, because basically there will be some type of crisis triggered to get him out and go for immediate snap elections or something of that sort. So I think this is going to happen sooner rather than later. I don't know what role Charles is going to play in this, other than obviously as the king, he can see what's going on in the kingdom, and that is going to impact the future of the Windsors also. So I think it's really quite a moment in Britain right now. It's sort of like the mass uprising which happened under the assassination of Princess Diana. And the response of the Windsors to that actually was completely crazy initially, but then actually came into the fact that they realized that they couldn't continue in that stance and had to give that national icon her due. So I'll leave my answer at that.
Thank you. Okay, so the next one is on Prince Harry in Ukraine. Why is Prince Harry in Ukraine? Is Harry working against Trump in an effort to undermine the president's peacekeeping efforts? Thank you, Russell. I think that's probably a large part of it.
That's true, and I have some sympathy for Harry and also for William, given what happened to their mother. But I think he's kind of, gone off the deep end at this point in terms of trying to make a role for himself in the world, which is really a role which is governed by imperial ideas. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, so for the next set of questions, we're coming into the ideological divide between the United that's going on, and starting with MK Ultra. I kind of felt the same thing here. Hold on. Okay. Hi, and thank you for educating us. Why did you say that MK Ultra program was a former program? It seems to be alive and well, and sadly in full force. I kind of feel the same way with you, Debbie. Barbara?
Yeah, let's say Debbie is quite astute in terms of understanding the nature of a lot of things. MK Ultra was a CIA program ultimately aimed at creating the perfect assassin by brainwashing someone into the mental status of a robot, so that you'd never be able to trace it back to the intelligence agency which created it. Now, they found out that they couldn't really do that. They tried all sorts of drugs. They tried all sorts of other things. And so they've been working on it and working on it and working on it ever since. And the idea here is that if you control the information coming into the human mind completely, you can create at least a temporary environment of complete emotional and mental instability sufficient to trigger someone, say, to actually act on that, believing that they are a modern day hero. For example, the mass media portrayal of Trump as Hitler has a certain impact on younger people in particular, who may see it as their goal to sacrifice themselves as a hero in this life, taking Adolf Hitler in modern form out. And I think that program in that sense is very alive and well. And where you look for it and look to see it is actually in the various propaganda and information warfare systems of NATO and the CIA and our military and the Ukrainian military from 2014 forward. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Next question. It seems that for a very long time, the ideological divide between American citizens has become so wide that our values are no longer in sync. Do you think it would be wiser to become two countries so that each side can live in peace? Thank you, Bev, who is also a longtime viewer here.
No. I strongly recommend that people, imbue themselves, take in the mindset of Abraham Lincoln, who faced a similar period in our past around the Civil War. Remember that you had a nation completely divided at that point between, two types of economy: a slave economy based on plantations and agriculture, and an emergent industrial economy based on the creative ideas of mankind. We basically came out of that because we realized, as Lincoln said at Gettysburg, that we were founded for a purpose, and it's the most unique purpose that ever existed, in terms of distilling what had become the history of mankind and Western civilization. We were and are the pinnacle of that. And that basically is what we have to fight for. It's a principle which supersedes our present divisions, which are largely manufactured. And if we take away the stimulus, which in many respects is happening now towards the division, basically the science on that says it's not long lasting. So the issue is, in a certain sense, just like the last election, too big to rig, and taking the younger population in particular and educating them in the classical principles, which actually allowed us to overcome these divisions at a very similar time somewhat in our past. So that's my answer. The oligarchy, by the way, has always wanted to divide the United States. The British Empire supported the Confederacy in the Civil War for a reason. We want to break it apart. We want to actually, seize on regional divisions. We want to balkanize the country, which becomes much, much easier to control if you do that.
Thank you, Barbara. If you're just tuning in, please, if you're enjoying our show here, please like this video. It helps increase our reach on YouTube's algorithm. It'll help bring more people in. And if you're not yet a subscriber, please subscribe to Promethean Action, the channel here. We do this live Q&A show every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern. And we also have 3 political updates that we do a week here on YouTube. So subscribe to the channel if you're interested in hearing more from us. Okay. Next question here. Actually, I'm going to take the next 2 questions because they're very similar. So the first one is from Thanda. The trillionaire oligarchs, such as the Rothschilds, are the largest part of the problem. Can we separate them from their ill-gotten wealth, our tax money? They have squirreled it away in Switzerland and the Caymans. Thank you, Thanda. And you talk about the European oligarchs and banking interests influencing and driving the left's actions. Who are they? The socialist leaders of which countries? Which banks and corporations are involved? Other NGOs? Thank you, Keith.
Well, the way I would answer the question to start with is you have to take a look at what I said before in terms of these consensus building organizations. That's where it starts. But it also starts from the standpoint of these massive multinational corporations and business cartels. And in Europe, obviously, you have these institutions like the Bilderberg Foundation, the Mount Pelerin Society, the World Economic Forum. They all go to that. And the European Union is essentially a tool of the very same oligarchs and central banking interests in the modern format, as is the City of London, as are all of the offshore, money laundering operations in the Caymans and Switzerland and elsewhere, as are the NGOs, such as everything associated with George Soros's Open Society Foundation. Now, the Trump administration is beginning to target, in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination and other things like the riots which occurred in 2020, the things which occurred with the election in 2020. They're looking at the institutional framework for this in terms of, are we giving money as the government to NGOs which are actually acting not in the best interests of the United States? Is George Soros's group, which is totally up to and involved in the operations against the 10-year soft coup in this country against Donald Trump? Remember that it was the Eurasia desk of the Open Society Foundation which played a key role in the recent disclosures which Tulsi Gabbard made about the operations against Trump. But George Soros is not only just a financial firm deeply tied to the City of London and all of its corporations. He's been completely integrated into the intelligence agencies like USAID, like the National Endowment for Democracy, etc. He functions on behalf of both British banking interests, but also these kind of corporatist forums which are critical to the present operation of the intelligence community, both in the United States and in Britain itself. So if you just look at the attendance list of all of these various consensus building institutions, you'll get an idea of who they are. But more importantly, it's the big multinational corporations, which since 1971 have formed huge cartels over fundamental things for the actual real economy, like in agriculture, for example. You have the big ag cartels. You also have big pharma. And just think about those two aspects of life, if you will, that are completely in control at this point of these kind of oligarchical formats and institutions and modern forms of what we used to call trusts in the United States. So that's what we're up against. That's what Trump is attacking directly at this point by going after their funding and exposing them. And this, if you thought we were in a battle up till now, wait till you see how this one actually begins to manifest itself.
Thank you, Barbara. I see a lot of new people here in the chat. This is Promethean Action's live question and answer show. We do this every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern. We also have we do it 3 times a week, a political update. That would be on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. Please like this video if you haven't yet already. Subscribe. Hit the bell icon so you get updated when we do our next. We don't want you to miss our next update. And if you want to ask a question, the best way to do it for our next show is to subscribe to our newsletter, because that's where these questions are coming from. So if you want to subscribe to our newsletter, the link is in the description, or you can just go to prom.ac. That's a website. It'll take you to Promethean Action, or you can just search the web for Promethean Action. So we're about a third of the way through the questions, and let's continue here. This next one is going to be on the UK and Charlie Kirk. Okay, talking about the British, Charlie Kirk debated in the UK for the first time on May 20th. It was ugly in terms of the smug disrespect for him. I watched it several times. One thing I thought of when this happened was that he was just in the UK. Do you think that the UK could have been behind it? Thank you, Debbie, for your question.
Do you want to play right now, Adam, the Mike Benz piece?
Yeah, I can do that for you. Let me pull this banner here too.
Have this State Department Trantifa network. They serve as militant boots on the ground in Europe, in South America, in Asia. And I pointed this out when you're talking about these networks, you even see Republican support for it. I pointed this out in Bangladesh, for example, last year when the Biden administration ousted the democratically elected prime minister in a coup. What was happening was the State Department was funding their little CIA cutout groups like the National Endowment for Democracy. Documents leaked online of the IRI, the International Republican Institute, which is the Republican wing of the National Endowment for Democracy, and their baseline assessment of the situation in Bangladesh and what options could be used by them with State Department money to destabilize the country, to bring it to its knees, because they did not expect to be able to win the next election. And a big part of that destabilization strategy was working with the transgender community in Bangladesh. I mean, this was a Republican Chamber of Commerce operation, and yet you had Republicans spending millions of dollars on the Bangladeshi transgender community because they could be easily radicalized and serve as the boots on the ground fodder against the democratically elected government in Bangladesh. And so you had them funding transgender dance festivals, transgender education clinics, transgender music and cultural events. You had them juicing the financial funnel of the entire network through all these different philanthropic or arts and cultural styled names. But what you're doing is you're paying the people, you're paying the organizers.
Now, the answer right now is that you have a radicalized transgender young person who very much appears to be, echoing the Antifa and transgender ideology. This movement of transgenderism and its use, by the intelligence services has been funded by the United States State Department, the UK Foreign Office, and George Soros's Open Society Foundations and the Ford Foundation as their primary funders. And what Mike Benz is saying there is these types of alienated, nihilistic movements, totally divorced from reality, increasingly psychotic, are the modern form of what we were talking about in terms of MK Ultra. Basically what's going on here is you have people who get radicalized by their situations and their emotional stability. We have an educational system which has created people through drugging people from age 5 forward who are extremely vulnerable to this type of alienation and radicalization. So yes, the Oxford debate was horrible because it basically represented a manifestation. If people haven't watched it, you probably should. A manifestation of the oligarchical disrespect for free speech and for religion itself, for God himself in any kind of form. That was the oligarchic view, which was really being set forth there almost in a satanic way. Were they directly behind it? That remains to be determined. But what we're talking about now is the modern apparatus, which is used in color revolutions, used in what is called hybrid warfare, i.e. not direct boots on the ground, but psychological warfare, which includes in its artillery assassinations, political assassinations. And this is something which is very clearly being investigated by the FBI. What I'm concerned about is we've got to get to the top of the matrix, if you will, very, very quickly. And that starts by targeting the top, which is kind of counterintuitive to the way that most investigators, in good faith, by the way, think about doing criminal investigations. What they think about is building a case from the ground up. What we're saying is you got to start with why was he killed, what was the motive, and what was the intention, and then look at the institutions which correlate with that in a very direct way.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, I'm going to take a quick aside from BW, who's been a longtime follower, especially of our live. The king called George Washington the rebel leader in front of Trump yesterday. Was that a passive aggressive British insult? Thank you, BW.
Absolutely. Knowing what we know about King Charles, no question about it. Very perceptive.
And then he came in and said, kind of disappointed how nice Trump was to him. Okay. I should give a shout out to Melody Hart, came in with a super sticker. We also have Debbie Myers. Thank you very much, Debbie. And I believe Amy Stew. Thank you very much, Amy. We really appreciate your support. And please make sure you're subscribed to our free newsletter so that you don't miss anything that we're doing. Because as everyone knows, YouTube likes to not show you your channel subscriptions and they like to not give you notifications. So if you get our email, it's just a better way for us to stay in contact with you. Okay, thank you. So going to move on to the next one here on the question of what can be done about this leftist violence. Thinking about the assassination of Charlie Kirk, my question is, what is it that can be done to alleviate the violence of the leftist ideologies prone to attack our politicians, judges, and each other in a supposed civilized society? Thank you, Maria.
I think that what the Trump administration is presently doing, I have one issue with what Pam Bondi actually said the other day, and she cleaned it up because, basically going after free speech as a criminal idea is absolutely antithetical to everything we stand for. The issue is you don't want to actually curtail speech. You want to take it out of the hands of a monopoly on speech, which is what we presently have with the present news media. And you want to foster alternative voices. You want to foster more speech coming from our side of the aisle and more speech coming from our side of the aisle and building the infrastructure to actually create that. So it's not just on the internet, but it's in major broadcast channels, etc. And I think basically what they're doing right now is that they just declared Antifa appropriately to be a violent terrorist group. They basically are investigating the Charlie Kirk assassination as a terrorist assassination. that gives them, in terms of the Kirk assassination itself, all sorts of ability to use the tools of warfare, which can actually be used to build cases and fight, this type of immediate situation by building up the entire case as to who done it, using every surveillance capacity we have as the United States when an actual crime is committed. I think what's going on in terms of businesses and others firing people who are, actually engaged in promoting false speech is significant in the sense that it creates a kind of different situation. But I don't necessarily think that doing it on the basis of what someone says is the answer. I think much more of the answer has to be, how do we actually create an environment where rationality and pursuing truth in a meaningful way and in a way which educates the public is given the primary media space. So I think they're doing everything they can. I only have that quibble in terms of the First Amendment. I'm what you might call a First Amendment absolutist. I think that inquiry and asking questions is the central way that you learn and create and pursue the truth. And you have to look at what other people are saying in that context, judge it, and then, as Charlie did and what he stood for, debate it through and force people to come to a very different conclusion. I also think all of the stuff in terms of modern hybrid warfare, i.e. what I just talked about, propaganda, the use of propaganda to mind bend, if you will, what is the status of the present MK Ultra program, has to be opened up, has to be disclosed, has to be declassified and opened up in some form for the public to actually see it. See how all of these things in terms of false flags on the internet and other things actually function to drive people crazy. So that's, I think, an answer to your question.
Thank you, Barbara. And an English friend, John Dingle. I think Charlie Kirk was assassinated because he was turning the tide. The left fear losing control because their end game is mass enslavement and control of all people worldwide. Yeah, that's certainly what the goal of globalization, the stated goal of globalization was. So yeah, John, I think we both agree with you here.
If you could, Adam, let's go ahead and play the Glenn Beck clip here, which is right on target with what he said.
Driving around as a sophomore and a junior in high school, listening to your
somewhere in this crowd, maybe he's 7, maybe he's 15, somewhere in this crowd is the next George Washington.
And 25 years from now, He will come not to this stair, but to those stairs.
We want to overemphasize grace when in reality Christ loves us too much to have us continue to live in sin. He wants us to try to elevate our actions to glorify God in all that we do.
And he can proclaim, I have a new dream.
I just went to church for the first time in several years.
Today we went to church for the first time in a really long time.
I've never ever opened a Bible before, and something was calling me to my husband's Bible.
Here's the line for the second service, and there's never a line.
Jesus of Nazareth, and the resurrection is the pinpoint of my belief that Jesus did rise from the grave so that we may live.
The light is dimming, yes, but it always does before the dawn.
I think that was, he actually captured in many respects what's going on. You have a sudden awakening in this country, which is monumental in the wake of the assassination. As his wife, Erica, said, you have no idea what you have unleashed here. And you have people turning to God at a point where, if you look on what comes from the manufactured left ideology, they say that God has abandoned this world, that there is no God. And Charlie actually believed that each of us is touched with the divine, that God lives within us, and that we are on a mission to continue God's creation. As he said there, I'm not interested in politicians. I'm interested in principles and in ideas. That is a critical part of what we're doing here at Promethean Action and Promethean PAC, is to bring that back to the fore, to actually cause a national debate to take place around our founding. It's the 250th anniversary of that great event in world history. And many of us do not understand the fundamentals of the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and what that meant for the entire world and our souls in the same way that Charlie Kirk did. So I think that's a very good pulling together of the present moment, which is now being unleashed and obviously can return this country to the notion that we're the city on the hill, the exemplar for the rest of humanity as to what a republic, not a democracy, a republic is actually all about, and what government of the people, by the people, and for the people must become as a mission. So that's what I would like to just say to kind of elevate that part of the discussion a little bit in terms of what is actually going on here, which is totally profound.
Thank you, Barbara. If you're just tuning in, this is our Promethean Actions live question and answer show. We do the show every Thursday at 11 a.m. We take questions from our newsletter supporters. If you're interested in asking a question on our next show, I urge you to subscribe to our free newsletter. The link is right there. It's also in the description. We have 3 political briefings a week, plus we have text art. We have a number of authors. We all write on similar topics. Get our free newsletter, and we hope to hear from you. Okay, so we're only going to be going for maybe another 30 minutes at most, because Barbara has a doctor's appointment. Also, Susan couldn't be here with us this week because she had prior engagements with the Michigan GOP, so she was not able to attend today. So I'm going to get into the section where it's a little bit tricky, where people are getting into like the analysis of the event instead of the bigger picture. And a lot of this is driven by the internet. So I'm gonna read these next 2 questions together that have a similar flavor. A large caliber deer rifle is a 30-06 properly zeroed in, should hit about an inch high at 100 yards, roughly 2 inches high at 200 yards. That's from a level plane. Even giving the knowledge in a properly sighted in rifle One would still need to be a practice shooter to make that shot with one bullet shooting at a downhill angle. I'm coming at this through common sense, logic, and reason. No more info than kid, just pictures and stories about. Okay, this is also sent before all the newer stuff came out, but are you okay? And you are most certainly not stuffing a 30-06 down your pants and walking anywhere with it. The limp is easily explained from jumping off down the roof. This looks more like an intelligence hit, and I believe the real purpose was their coveted Civil War fantasy. I'm not indulging in conspiracy theories. These are just some real problems, as usual, with the official explanation. I'm not buying it. Okay, thank you, Joe, for your comments. And I'm going to take the next one here from Ty. I've been a media researcher and broadcaster for many years. I appreciate your work and efforts. I am stunned by your superficial narrative of this Kirk shooting. There are many of us, including myself, that are familiar with the CIA, AI lies, and scams to affect us emotionally. If we are to offer the people the truth about such a story, such as Butler, Sandy Hook, etc., and now Kirk, we must raise uncomfortable questions and be untrusting of the narrative. For one, where are all the close-up videos of the Kirk blood shooting and rescue operation? And are we stupid? They don't have an identity of the so-called shooter. Again, this is before all the stuff came out. There is a plethora of public evidence that points to a scam. With all love and respect, wake up. Thank you, Ty. So
I fully understand why people are skeptical. After all, we've been lied to about practically everything by our government prior to Donald Trump. We were lied to about the Kennedy assassination. We were lied to about the RFK Jr. assassination. We were lied to about the Martin Luther King assassination. And that's just the boomers. There's a lot of things which need to be answered in terms of the Butler situation. What's the deal with his phones, etc. I think that stuff has to be disclosed. I'm quite confident that they probably have cracked them. There's a lot of stuff to be discussed about the Ukrainian government and CIA connections of the guy being tried right now down in Florida for the golf course assassination. But, and I make this a big but, I believe that the present FBI and the CIA and the national intelligence community under Tulsi Gabbard view this as deeply personal. They were friends of Charlie. And that comes through in everything they're saying. There's a lot of stuff which is not going to be put on the internet. In fact, the actual, assassination snuff film, thank God, was actually taken down for good reason. You don't want your kids living that over and over and over again. I found it so atrocious that I couldn't get it out of my head for days. So they're gathering evidence. They're gathering actual factual evidence to build a criminal case against this guy. They're using every tool they have, including surveillance, including ballistics, including DNA, including many, many other tools which they have, which are classified. That's part and parcel why you see the classified stuff around the Florida guy. In terms of not being revealed in the courtroom. That's the nature of a criminal case. It's limited, all right? You're building a case to convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that this is the guy, that he did it, and his motive was, basically coming off of a schooling in both trans ideology, which is a violence-prone operation, and coming off of schooling in Antifa ideology, which is specifically a British intelligence operation. Antifa was created in 1989 in the wake of the fall of the Berlin Wall. It was an operation against the then German government by Britain and Margaret Thatcher and all the instruments of British intelligence at the highest level to prevent Germany from becoming the major power in Europe yet again, and to maintain the hold of the British over the EU and over Germany. And Antifa was their creation. Adam's going to post an article which goes through how that all operated. But Antifa means anti-fascist. And the idea was that Germans and people in the United States, even, who exercise leadership, actually have fascism in their blood, so to speak. And that the appropriate role of young people in the world is to oppose this by any means necessary, including violence. So once it was created in the wake of the fall of the wall, in the wake of a massive intelligence operation against the reemergence of Germany as an economic power, it was turned into the United States to prevent the United States also from reviving itself as a major economic power. If you think about the Biden administration, we were stripped down to practically nothing in terms of an economy, in terms of an ability to sustain and support a population. It's horrible what Donald Trump actually inherited. It's a very unstable economic situation. And throughout the entire coup against him, all of these radicalized left ideologies, which basically border on both insanity and outright nihilism in the form of Friedrich Nietzsche's famous statement, "God is dead, and there's no purpose in this world. We are all animals. We're not what in the mode of God's creation, creators in this world. We essentially are like beasts." That's at the core of British oligarchical philosophy. It's everything that Charlie opposed. It's everything which people are coming to grips with now. So, I respect the fact that people have a lot of questions. A lot of people are not familiar with how you build a criminal prosecution and the fact of what you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. In some respects, people are giving the defense attorneys here all the arguments which they might want to use to get this guy off. And I find that to be a kind of interesting irony of the present period. But again, they're not going to tell us everything at this point. The guy was captured within 33 hours, which is a remarkable achievement. And I think what you're going to find as this proceeds to trial is most of your questions about this guy and this incident are going to be answered. One place is the courtroom, but not thoroughly at all, because there's limits to what you can present in a case about somebody. There's limits on where you can go in terms of theories of the case, etc. But it's also going to be found when we go after Antifa, when we go after Soros, when we go after all of these NGOs and the relationship to our intelligence community and the British intelligence community in particular, in terms of both Antifa and radical trans ideology. There's lots of leads here, which I don't discount, and you should turn them into the FBI, which is taking your leads and actually running each one of them down, as Kash Patel said. Some people have talked about, well, wow, what was the relationship of trans terrorism to the terrorism in Ukraine, for example, since Ukraine seems to be playing a significant role in all of these Trump assassination scenarios. I remind people to take a look at the famous video on the internet by someone named Sarah Ashton Cirillo, who was a trans American who became the leading spokesman for the Ukrainian Defense Forces, and then turned around and threatened everybody who was opposing the Ukraine war in the United States with the equivalent of death. Now, she was fired for that, but think about the mindset of the person actually saying that and doing that. And you see that we're going to get there, but it's only through things which probably are not going to be in the courtroom because of the rules of evidence that you actually have to function under there, but will be in the public domain because we're going after all of the people who fostered this ideology to destroy the United States.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, we're coming into the last 15 minutes of our show. Unfortunately, Barbara doesn't have so much time to spend with us today, but we'll definitely be back next week. So, and Susan will be back with us next week too. But I'd like to give a final shout out to my new t-shirt design that's launching today. You can see I'm wearing it right here. It really prints out quite bright. It's an attention getter. If you're looking to make a splash somewhere out in public, this is the shirt for you. I have a 10% off code I'm going to offer people. Thank you for sticking around today. If you use that QR code that's down there or that link right there, you'll get 10% off all of our merch store, including our ebooks, my Einstein t-shirt, my MAGA 2028 t-shirt, our logo t-shirt. All of our merch will be 10% off if you use that link. And I hope you'll check out my shirt at least. Okay, so next one we're going to take is we're going to start looking at some international issues before we go here, because this is a very big issue that a lot of people think about. Okay, I've been reading the book by Richard Poe, and if you guys don't know, this is actually a pretty cool book. The name of the book is How the British Created Communism and Blamed It on the Jews. So that's the Richard Poe book that he's referring to. I've been reading the book by Richard Poe you've been recommending and wondering if the Trump White House is aware of the historical use of color revolutions to subvert governments, as it certainly seems that the US is in the middle of one right now. If yes, is this why the Trump administration is finally talking of going after the funders of such operations? Thank you, Yves.
Yes, it is true, and they are going after all of these guys. Remember, USAID, which was the center of this stuff, has been completely wiped out and defunded and subverted into the State Department. The National Endowment for Democracy, which is the cutout for running color revolutions for the CIA and has functions as such over time, was cut totally in funding by the Trump administration, although idiots in Congress were tied to the National Endowment for Democracy. You saw Mike Benz's piece earlier, which emphasizes the International Republican Institute, which is part of the NED apparatus, and their role in promoting transgender violence as an operative form of color revolutions. In other words, they're the street thugs on the ground in terms of creating the conditions for overthrowing governments. So that's why we're going after this stuff. That's why we're going after Soros. That's why we're going after the Ford Foundation. If you look at Black Lives Matter, you're going to see the same funding pattern, and you're going to see exactly what happened throughout the course of 2020 as they began to actually put together the operation to take the 2020 election and to, if Trump had won, cause a violent overthrow of the United States government using the military. It's a shocking story, but I can tell you right now that the Trump administration is deeply, deeply aware of this.
Thank you. Okay, the next one is on India. Do you believe that Trump is aligning with Russia and the next one will be on India. Do you believe that Trump is aligning with Russia and China to slap the British down? I just read that China has stopped accepting Canadian oil.
I think that that's true. And, I think that Trump is generally engaged against this overweening kind of oligarchical apparatus, which we call the modern British financial empire, as distinct, as everybody likes to remind us every day, from the British people and from the occupants of England, Scotland, and Ireland. So, what we would like to see ultimately, and what we have long said, is that you have basically three other nations in the world, which in combination with the United States have the power to actually cause a new human renaissance, similar to the Renaissance which led us out of the dark ages of feudalism. And that is Russia, China, India, and the United States. And the British Empire has spent a long, long time and most of their money trying to prevent these nations from coming together and actually having the types of agreements which, despite our many, many differences in terms of culture, could take down the power of this oligarchical menace to the world. So the answer is yes, and it needs to be deepened by actually thinking through something like, how do we create a new monetary system to have these four nations being capable of creating those types of projects which will further the prosperity of the entire human race. And that's really the larger issue in terms of a four powers agreement. The British House of Lords put out a very interesting report in 2018 called British Foreign Policy in a Shifting World Order, in which they targeted these four nations specifically to get them as areas where the British had to create major influence and to keep these nations fighting one another.
Thank you, Barbara. Excuse me. Thank you, Barbara. If you're tuning in just now, this is Promethean Actions live question and answer show. We do this every Thursday at 11 a.m. Please like and subscribe. If you haven't yet liked this video, it definitely sends a good signal to the YouTube algorithm. And please subscribe. We have three political updates a week that are not live. This is our once a week live show on Thursday. So please like and subscribe this video if you're interested in seeing our next political update, which will be on Saturday morning. All right, so we're coming into about the last 10 minutes before Barbara has to leave for an appointment this afternoon. Our next question is going to be on India. What is the situation with tariffs against India, and what is the repercussions for India? And what does this mean for the United States? So thank you, Kevin. A question on Trump's relationship with India.
It's very clear that India has an extremely protectionist economy which protects India. And Modi is very, very patriotic in that sense, and that he is out to protect his own nations. Basically, these secondary tariffs around the Ukraine war were kind of a political compromise by Trump to get the idiots like Lindsey Graham and the Congress off of his back. And he is right now re-engaging with Modi to actually come up with a compromise measure on the tariffs. You know, there was all this fufferole around Modi going to the BRICS, etc. That underestimates what India has always done in the Cold War and elsewhere, which has insisted upon its sovereignty and insisted upon its neutrality in all of these conflicts which actually occur in the world. So I think it's a temporary thing. India has a closed economy because, you know, Modi is trying to raise his people, particularly his farming and agricultural sector, up to the levels of a modern economy. And he can't, that's the reason why you have tariffs. You don't want people who are more advanced in many respects flooding your country with much, much cheaper goods, including China, which, you know, basically has something of an adversarial relationship to India around, you know, various disputes set up a long time ago, as most of these things are. So I think Modi is essentially in a negotiating mode at this point. I think that whatever damage may have been done by the tariffs initially, I don't think it was that much damage. I think it was understood that this was a political ploy here by Trump to, you know, deal with both India's closed economy and trying to figure out how do you actually create the best relationship for both producers on each side of the production cycle between India and the United States. And I don't think that it has any long-lasting effect, because I think Trump is absolutely eager to maintain his relationship to his good friend, Modi. So that's what I'd say about that.
Thank you. All right, the next one here was a big thing last week. What is really behind the so-called Russian attack on Poland? Is it a false flag operation to provoke Poland to join the Ukraine war? What is Putin thinking with this attack on Poland? Thank you from Thank you, Jania from Poland.
I think that the general consensus is that this was a mistake. And, that's what Trump said, despite the fact that all of these, Poland is a very divided government at this point. You have Nowacki, who is nominally for the Ukraine war, but 100% for Polish sovereignty. And then you have on top of that, all of the NATO people and all of the Anglo-American freaks who are also in the government. And the supply lines for Western aid to Ukraine run very, very close to the border of Poland in Ukraine. So, it has been for almost 3 years now been deemed to be a maximum territory for false flag operation by mistake in many respects, because the Russians are trying to hit those supply lines and they're trying to do it within Ukraine. Sometimes that's simply going to not happen. So it was designed at a point where we're trying to end the war to actually expand the war by not just Poland, but saying that this was an Article 5 incident, which causes all of NATO to actually respond in open warfare with Russia. It didn't happen. And the reason why it didn't happen is because of Donald Trump. So that's why I'd leave the answer to the question.
All right. Thank you, Barbara. I'm going to do one last recap here, and we're going to take the last question. So first, if you're just tuning in, I'm sorry. We're coming into the end of the show. This is a live Q&A show we do here on Promethean Action every Thursday at 11 a.m. Please like and subscribe. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel. We do 3 political briefings a week. We don't want you to miss the next one. So the final question today is going to be on the Federal Reserve, which I think is a very important question. So this will be the last question for today. Just join us next week at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We'd love to have you. So last question for today. Why does Scott Bessent not explain in layman's terms exactly how the Federal Reserve works and how it creates the debt that the American public becomes responsible for out of thin air, transferring massive indebtedness onto the public whilst never having provided anything to the public other than worthless paper bills? Oh, and a heap of inflation too. Surely, if that fact was widely understood, support for what Donald Trump is doing would be overwhelming. Thank you very much, Paul, who I believe is a longtime listener.
I think you've got to take into account what the overall economic situation actually is that this administration inherited. Trump's question to Scott Bessent when he got appointed, or when he was being interviewed as the Treasury Secretary, is how do we actually revive the economy without crashing it? And that's very much in play. You got to understand how deeply, deeply unstable this economy was under the final stages of its destruction under the Biden administration, which was really a complete destruction of our working force, of our ability to produce things, of everything which traditionally is the American economy. I think that what's going on with the Fed at this point is that, Bessent is calling for an audit, which will most certainly show people how the Fed works if he succeeds in doing that. I think that, basically all the things you're saying about what the Fed does can be, described in great detail, including the fact that it's right now holding massive amounts of foreign debt in its accounts, which we're actually paying interest at 4% on, which is absurd. All right. And that's part of the bailout, which came from 2008 and the total financial collapse of the world's economy, which occurred in 2008. What people don't understand, I don't think, most about what Trump is doing is the revival of what we call the real economy. In other words, your factories, your manufacturing base, your defense industrial base, your scientific base, all of which have been ruined on behalf of a monetary policy in which people take the metrics of the economy by the daily ding, 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 ding bell reports they hear from Wall Street, which is not the metric we need to be using. We need to be using a metric which says how much every day are we increasing the productive power of our labor force in the United States through all sorts of means, be it AI or something else. That needs to be the fundamental question which we're posing ourselves as we rebuild this economy every single day. And I think that's the question which Scott Besson has. If you look at it not from that standpoint, but a purely monetary standpoint, or the standpoint of the stock market, or the standpoint of the sins of the Fed, you're going to miss the big picture in terms of what Trump is actually producing with Besson's help here. And remember, the whole thing is about, we inherited an economy which was about to crash, just like Britain's economy is crashing right now, just like the French economy is crashing right now, etc. How do you, and this is the problem which the administration is facing, resurrect our economy, create millions of apprenticeships, which they're doing, so that people can be trained in the jobs of the future, the high-paying jobs of the future, so that one family, one wage earner in a family can support a whole family, can support children, can, as Charlie Kirk said so eloquently in the little clip we saw, assume the moral duty of producing and raising children, which changes your entire cultural outlook for the world, etc. Those are the metrics we need to talk about. The Fed, I think, will be limited right now in its role in the big war which Trump is waging. Wall Street, obviously, and the City of London are opposing him. People need to understand that fight, but they also need to understand it in terms of the much bigger fight to understand the difference between a productive economy and the economy we've had for the last, since 1971, really. It's cross generations. Susan had a very interesting conversation with one of the candidates in Michigan yesterday when she was talking about Freedom's Forge, the book about the World War II mobilization of the economy, which actually won the war and produced the most productive economy yet in human history. And he said, when I talk about that, when I talk about what my generation did, all my people all my aides in this campaign are 30 years old, and they look at me and their eyes go up and they say, this is just old man's talk, etc. And they don't realize the difference between what we have to produce at this point, and that's a mandate. We won't win in 2026 in the crucial midterms unless people actually understand this directionality versus the other one. So the Fed has a certain limited role to play in terms of the money supply. That's what Trump is driving to actually limit them to. And that's why Besson wants an audit of the Fed to show why they've actually abandoned that and expanded into areas like, using climate change as a metric, which has nothing to do with what the Fed is limited even by its own statutes to do. So that's how I answer your question.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, we've reached the end of our show today. Any final closing questions or comments?
I think we're in the middle of, in my lifetime, the greatest historical moment any of us have actually experienced. And I think that people have to really step back and take in the notion, as Charlie Kirk said, we're not fighting against flesh and blood. We're fighting, as the Bible says, against principalities and powers. Ideas and principles are the key thing which we have to focus on at this point. I would like to suggest that people take it upon themselves to read 2 dialogues of Plato in the course of the next month or so as a project. One is called the Meno, And it basically proves to you that there exists in every human being a creative power, which comes with the human biology, quite literally. And the second is the sophist. And what the sophist deals with, as people may know, in ancient Athens, in the assemblies, there used to be people who would show up as what we would call today propagandists. And they would have brilliant rhetorical skills, the ability to convince you of something like a good salesman does, even when there's no basis for it, that an illusion was true. And what Plato does in the dialogue of the sophist is actually go over the methodology by which you actually can explore the truth and determine who is a sophist and who is a philosopher. And my ending today is to tell you that I believe firmly that Charlie Kirk was a philosopher, and understanding the difference between him and a lot of other people on the internet who are trying to claim his heritage is the most important consideration you can take from today.
All right. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you to the chat, and for everyone who tuned in live. If you haven't yet already, please like this video. It does send a good message to the algorithm. And we will see you next week at 11 a.m. Eastern. And Susan will most probably be with us then. So thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you next week.